Welcome back to another episode of Hobby Time in the Murder Basement, where today we sit down and talk with Wyatt from Jack of Clubs Painting and Long War fame. We have an awesome conversation about the state of play of 40K, and I think it made me feel a lot better about the hobby in general. So stick around, it was a great conversation. Wyatt, thank you so much for joining me today. Today we have Wyatt from Jack of Clubs Painting and Long War fame. If you have not seen any of his videos or checked out him on the Long War podcast, I highly recommend doing it. He's very funny and a very talented painter. Wyatt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, man, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. I figure while we're all locked inside right now, this is a pretty fun thing to do to keep us all from going totally stir crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's equally like a blessing and a curse, because I have been able to like finish stuff quite a bit ahead of schedule and get into some projects that I probably wouldn't normally have had time to do. But at the same time, like, not being able to play Warhammer and having tournaments canceled and that sort of thing is definitely a drag, but you know, we're making the best of it.
Yeah, I have to say, seeing things pop up like Adepticant and, you know, like, even though Facebook is kind of like a toxic cesspool from hell these days, it seems to be a place where all of us is kind of returned to as friends instead of returned to as frenemies, and
Right.
and that's been kind of nice to actually get back in touch with people and feel like the community is growing closer together, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten that sense.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad it's not just me. So what's your history with the hobby? Because I've watched a lot of your videos. I haven't hopped on in any streams and things like that because I am a selfish consumer of entertainment, and streams drive me nuts because you're talking to a group of people and not just me. That's
Right,
why I like
yeah.
watching the YouTube videos.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But like, how did you start? What's your history in the hobby, wargaming, and everything?
Well, I mean, it's been damn near 20 years almost, which is fun to think back on, because you know how like sometimes you think of yourself as like perpetually at a certain age, and then you wake up and you're like, oh yeah, I'm like 30, so I need to.
Yeah.
So I realized the other day, I was like, shit, it's been like almost 20 years since I've gotten into Warhammer, and I can actually remember exactly the first time I ever saw or heard about Warhammer, and it was in 2002. I was in like a middle school, like after school program where you would wait if you had like working parents, you know, because like in the late 90s they started that initiative where they didn't want any more like latchkey kids, if you remember.
Right.
That phenomenon.
Right.
Yeah, so like for a little bit I was a
remember
latchkey
that.
kid.
Yeah.
And so then they were like, well, you know, you gotta, like, we'll keep you at school to do activities and stuff until your parents can get off work and come get you. And there was a kid who had, I want to say it was the 3rd edition or maybe the 4th edition box starter set that was like Black Templars versus Eldar.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. I remember the Black Templars because like he had the starter set and he was putting them together, and he had the big rule book, and we were just kind of like talking about it and leafing through it, and I remember like going through the rule book and seeing the artwork and all that kind of stuff, and I was instantly like, this is the coolest thing ever. And so then I immediately wanted to go and get the models, and as soon as my parents saw the price, they were just like, no.
Right. Right.
So for the vast majority of the early time with my experience of Warhammer, it was like I got like a meager allowance, And back in those days, like Black Library softbacks were like $5 at Barnes and Noble, right?
Right.
So like every weekend we would go to Barnes and Noble and I would buy a new book, and I would just, I would tear through them during the week. I would knock them out in a couple of days. So like, I guess like other than just like seeing it out in the wild, like my first major jump into 40K was the Eisenhorn Omnibus, which had just recently been released in softback, so I had all 3 of the original books in that, and then Dead Sky Black Sun. And that Dead Sky Black Sun was like really what got me into it, because like if you remember the original Eisenhorn books, like they're definitely 40K books, but it was well before the sort of like organization of the lore, and like before Black Library was like, all right, if you're gonna write for us, like here's your like lore Bible, and you have to like stick within this canon and like that sort of thing. So it was the Wild West back then. Like you had all sorts of wacky shit. And like when you read the original Eisenhorn books, like if you don't have a framework for what 40K is and the lore of 40K, it's basically just a bog standard like sci-fi crime noir book.
Right. So are you talking as far as I know, that there's only the Dan Abnett books. Is that the ones you're talking about?
Yeah. So like the original 3, this is before. I think he was either like just coming out with the Ravenor series, or like it was right before Ravenor. But like they had the 3 original Eisenhorn omnibus books.
And they're awesome books. I freaking love those books.
They're amazing,
they're like
right?
Indiana Jones in outer space.
Like it was before they had really fleshed out what psychic powers were, and so like he always referred to psychic powers of like a force of will, because he wasn't like a full on I mean, like he had a lightsaber, like that was what like a power sword was to Dan Abnett at the time. It was a literal lightsaber. And then like Dead Sky Black Sun, which was by Graham McNeil, and that's like I think the 3rd book in the Ultramarines omnibus. So like I kind of jumped in without knowing about the other 2. I just saw it, and like I saw the artwork, and it was really, really cool. And that was what really started my love affair of 40K was Dead Sky Black Sun, because that is like your Space Marine hero, does a bunch of action stuff, some bolter porn, that kind of thing. And I mean, I've been a diehard Ultramarines fan like ever since. So like I have
an unapologetic Ultramarines fan, which I really appreciate, because like you're just like, no, I like these guys. Shut the fuck up.
Like the 40K hipsters that like to shit on the Ultramarines because the studio army switched from Black Templars to Ultramarines, like, which is funny because like a lot of people don't understand why they went with Ultramarines. One, Black Templars don't really look like good guys. And anybody that's in the 40K know, like, there is no good guys in 40K, right? Like, everybody is a shade of asshole, with the Imperium usually being propped up as, like, slightly less so. But, like, Black Templars, they don't look like good guys. Like, they can be, like, crusading knights, but they're always, like, they're not, like, superheroes, right? Like, you don't get that Superman vibe from Black Templars. So they went with the Ultramarines, which canonically are the first among equals, so like suck it, we're the best. And they look like they're the heroes, right? Like they're these enlightened guys. Like Ultramar is like this amazing place in the Imperium that's usually better than everywhere else because it's not like a steaming shit pile like most of these hive cities.
Right.
And then also on a marketing perspective, blue and gold or blue and yellow is one of the most like recognizable color combinations, and it just always looks good. Like you would be really hard pressed, like if you got 100 people together and you showed them a picture of blue and gold, or like some object or product that was blue and gold, you'd be hard pressed for them to be like, oh, that looks ugly, right? Like maybe 1 in 100 people, right? So statistically, like if your flagship property needs a face, the Ultramarines are really good for that because they are that really nice color combination of blue and gold. Blue is also like emotionally, blue is a very like non-aggressive color.
Right.
You see it everywhere. I mean, like I have Facebook open right now. What are Facebook's colors? It's like it's blue and white.
Blue and white.
Yeah, like blue is a really like, you know, easy color for people to accept, whereas like red can be aggressive. It can mean certain things. Like we also associate red with like here on Skype, the end call button is red. Like stoplights are red. Stop signs, things like that. It's also like a hazardous color, so like fire engines and things like that are red. So like to have a product like that on the shelf and be the face of the studio army, like it just makes a lot of sense. And then in a painting perspective, like blue is one of the easiest colors to paint just because of how paint works and like pigment density and that sort of thing. So like if you're putting up a product and you want it to look good, blue and gold is great. And then like you want to get people into your hobby. So like this is the, hey, come try this out. Like come paint our models. Like here's some paint. Like blue paint is one of the easiest paints to use. Like it's almost impossible for a company to have shitty blue paint.
Right.
Like, they can have bad yellows. They can have like shitty reds that don't cover very good. Their metallics aren't great, right? But blue, like almost universally, is really easy to paint with no matter what type of paint you're using. So like it just makes so much sense, other than like ultramarines, like the lore behind them or like whatever it is your feelings on it are. But beyond that, like ultramarines could be like, you know, almost any color. I'd probably still like them because, you know, they're like space Romans and they're, you know, heroic and all that kind of stuff. So I love everything about them.
Yeah, I got into 40K kind of a similar route as you did. I've actually really only been into 40K and miniatures really for the last couple of years, mainly because I find myself, you know, I started doing like the board games, the Kingdom Deaths and stuff like that. And, you know, anytime you're in a miniature hobby, you are going to go to GW products, Warhammer. It doesn't matter. Like it's almost like a fatalistic, determined future. You were going to end up at this place, no matter what. But I got a Humble Bundle with the audiobooks for the Horus Heresy, which I always thought was a horrible name. Like the Horus Heresy makes no sense to literally anybody in the world except for 40K fans. And even then, I don't think anybody understands the Horus Heresy as far as a statement.
I remember when they first started coming out with that series, I was still in high school, I think, when the first books were coming out. And I remember being like, hey, can I get some of these books for Christmas? And my parents were like, what is the Horus Hearsay? And I'm like, no, guys, come on.
No.
But yeah, like, I'm actually really glad they're wrapping it up, because I got out of that book series because at a certain point, Games Workshop kind of realized like that it was sort of a cash cow property, and they just kept churning out stuff that had like nothing to do with the overarching like story of the heresy. You know, like you have your beats. Like there's like the end of the Great Crusade, Horus gets corrupted, the heresy starts, the battle on Terra, right?
Right.
There was just too much stuff where they were just like, yeah, let's go like with this like fuck off adventure with the Salamanders where they find some Eldar Exodite planet, and it has like nothing to do with anything else. I'm just like, I don't care. Like this is filler content that I don't give a shit about. Like I want to get back to what I care about. So with the Siege of Terra books coming out, actually really excited about that, because I think it was either Unremembered Empire or the book that came out right after that. That was like the last Horus Heresy book that I read as part of the series. And then I got back into it with the Siege of Terra because I'm like, I kind of already know everything that's happened in between then. And I don't particularly care about the minutia of those stories. But now that we're like on the Siege of Terra and like it's going down, like I'm excited again. So the first book was really good. I really liked it. I think the second one is about to come out on audiobook. I know the physical copy is out, but I never read anymore. I just don't have time.
Right, of course.
So I'm waiting for the second one to come out on Audible, and hopefully they're like, oh, this is gonna be $20. I'm like, oh my god, come on. Like, hopefully it's like short.
I think they said 5 books, which I can get in for a 5-book arc. You know, like,
Yeah, I think that'll be
and
all
wrap
right.
it up. Yeah,
Because they churn them out a lot
start...
faster than like normal. I mean, like, you know, if you're a fan of like Way of Kings or something, like you have to wait for Brandon to like 2 years in between every books, and that's still like exceptionally fast for most writers.
Right.
Like Brandon is a machine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, George R. Martin and like book number 6 of, you know, Song of Ice and Fire. Like, we're still waiting. We're
No, it's
still
never
waiting.
gonna happen.
No,
It'll
it's
never
not.
happen.
He will die of the coronavirus, and we'll all be like,
he got paid.
fuck.
He was like a poor kid from Jersey. This is what he wanted his whole life. Like he got fucking paid, and he's like, yeah, I'm just like, I don't feel like writing anymore. I'm just gonna be like a gazillionaire and live on my ranch and let the nerds who run my fan club finish that book.
Well, and that, you know, it might be better that way because, you know, at that point, you know, you get that weird bloat happening around the lore, and it's, you know,
Oh yeah,
get passionate about it.
I remember seeing an interview with him where he has like 2 people that are the curators of like the wiki page, and those are like his fact checkers because he can't even remember details that he's right. He's like, what color was this character's eyes? And they're like, oh, let's look that up. Oh, they were green. You know, and like they'll check him on stuff. They'll be like, oh, okay, so like this guy has blonde hair and you wrote him with brown hair, so you need to fix that. You know, I'm just like, he's never gonna finish it.
It's not happening. No. It's sad, but also I think an interesting thing to see. You know, like, I don't understand how GW works just in general. Like their business model is completely anti-consumer and pro-consumer at the same time. Like I'm
what some people probably don't know is that like I actually, like, technically I still work for the company. Like I was an on-call
really?
Yeah, so I was an on-call manager for a little while at our little local shop up here.
Okay.
Cool. I mean, like, I'm still very like kind of see myself as almost like a double agent because I'm still very like, I love Warhammer and
Sure.
I don't always agree with Games Workshop, so I'm not like a zealot for them. Like I'll call them on bullshit, like I call it like I see it, right? So really the only thing you have to understand about Games Workshop business strategy is market domination.
Right.
Like I think the best example of their business strategy is in fact the Lord of the Rings series, because like nobody fucking cares about that game. I'm like,
Right.
I'm sorry, like the 4 people in the world that play it that I just triggered, but like nobody fucking plays that game.
Right.
Lord of the Rings hasn't been relevant as an IP in like over a decade, but Games Workshop keeps turning out products for that. And the reason for that is they have the sole, like they have exclusive rights for that property from New Line Cinema to create miniatures and like games for Lord of the Rings, right?
Right.
Like other people can make like card games or maybe like RPGs or video games, but nobody else can make miniatures games, right? They have exclusive rights to like the miniatures side of things.
Right.
And part of that contract is that there's a certain amount of time where they have to prove that they're like maintaining the IP. So it's like it's either like 1 or 2 years. Like if they don't release like something new to show that they're like still working on it, like still growing that IP, then that contract is then voided and somebody else can buy the rights. And even though like it hasn't been relevant in a long time, it is possible for another company to pick that up and then like revitalize interest in it, right? Like a new game.
Right.
You know, like tomorrow if somebody was like, hey, we have this new miniatures board game for Lord of the Rings on Kickstarter, it would probably do gangbusters, right?
It would.
Or it might do terrible and whatever. But as long as Games Workshop is making some money on it, or even like no money, even if they're breaking even, nobody else can make money.
Right.
Because they have the exclusive rights. And as long as they can do that, they're fine with it. Because they make up for that windfall with 40K and Age of Sigmar and their other like smaller games, right? So like they are totally fine breaking even losing money on Lord of the Rings as long as they're the only ones that can do that. Right. And that is systemic of their entire business model, which is why you see the reason they do things they do. And they've gotten a lot better in recent years. Like, you know, as like kitschy as it is to be like, oh, the new GW, like even they kind of acknowledged it. Like there was, I remember like 2005 to 2015, like it was the dark times. It was not great.
Yeah.
And so like the company's gotten a lot better, but you're right. Like at odds with itself, it is equally great for us, but also kind of fucks us at the same time, which can be very frustrating.
Yeah. I have a buddy who used to manage one of the local GW stores here, and he did it during the dark time. I think it was after he stopped working for me, so 2012 to like 2014, I think. So he did it for about 2 years, and he still gets phone calls like if he could come in and watch the store, and he like burnt his bridge. He was like, I am so tired of doing this for you guys, and they still call him because he knows what he's doing. He's a very trustworthy guy. I would love working with Kennard any day, but he talks about like the business model then, where it was pre Age of Sigmar, so it was still fantasy was a rotting vine, and 40K they were pushing, but like I don't think anybody had any understanding of the future of what 40K would be. And it seems like within like 2015 to now, these last 5 years have been completely different for the company. They have, releases every 2 weeks, which is either good or bad, depending on how you look at it. Yeah. And they, besides like, unless if you love things like the Necrons or, like Tree Folk or something from fantasy, you're pretty much getting serviced about once a quarter with this company. And that's pretty unbelievable to see that sort of pace. When, I remember when he tried to get me into the game, I was like, there is no way in hell I'm trying to keep up with this. I'm going to spend this money to like, it didn't make sense to me. And now I'm pretty obsessed and addicted. So whatever happened. Yeah.
Like, as much as we all bitch about it, right? Because I mean, like we'll bitch about stuff on our podcast, even though there may not be any reason to, but it's just like people get frustrated by little things, right? And it's sometimes you have to humble yourself, and it's like you have to kind of take a few steps back, a couple big steps back, and be like, our lives are so good that the only thing that we can find to vent our frustrations about is a company that makes plastic army men. Right. Like, and even as much as we whinge about it sometimes, like this is the best that it's ever been, and it's only ever getting better. So like there is that weird paradox of like some of the people in our community just like never being able to be pleased because like they're so like in their own head about what they want, that if they don't get that exact thing every time there's a new announcement, they get upset. And I feel like that's the wrong way to look at this. I mean, I feel like I empathize with people who are like diehard Necron fans and they haven't gotten new models other than like one character in like an age. So like, I feel like, it sucks if that's your thing, right? I don't feel that because like primarily I am either like an Imperium player or a Chaos player, and I dabbled in orcs. So I'm usually set, but at the same time, like it's the best it's ever been. Just like be patient, like you're gonna get cool stuff, like it will happen eventually. One of the things that we're kind of waiting on is, for the past couple of years, Games Workshop has been building an entirely new manufacturing facility, like a massive new facility, because it's funny, one of the reasons that we've had stock issues and like releases being limited and things like that is because they did not expect the massive amount of influx of people for 8th edition. Like their projections were very conservative about how many people we would get, right? And how many people would like come back and like buy new things with every new release and that sort of deal, right? And it's funny, the facility I forget exactly when, but it's within the past couple of years. They've actually had some restrictions put on it about how long they can run the facility each day, because the infrastructure of where that facility is outside Nottingham, like it does, like they don't have the electrical infrastructure for that plant to run 24/7. So
Right.
there was a problem of the plant actually causing brownouts in the city. And so the
Oh,
city was like,
geez.
all right, after like 7, 8 p.m., whatever it is, like you have to turn off all the machines and you cannot run them again until like this time of day. Right.
Right.
So their manufacturing has been gated, has been throttled by that until they can get this new facility, which is in a different location and has all that infrastructure. They'll have more machines and all of that good stuff, but we don't exactly know when that's going to happen because they've played it extremely close to the chest as they are a publicly traded company.
Right.
So kind of what I envision is that like once that facility is up and running, we're gonna enter sort of like a new golden age for all of the franchises, where they will be able to have like new releases more often, and we
Sure.
won't have those stock issues. Because like one of the big things that a lot of people want is any model that's over like 10 years old like severely needs an update. And one of the things they have to kind of like play this juggling game of like giving out new releases and like updating old models, because you can't have both. Like but when they get their new facility online, they might be able to do that, and that's what I'm hoping for. And before all of this COVID stuff started happening, like we were kind of seeing a big picture sort of plan where you could see that they were rolling out with all of these new visual properties, like these new shows. Like they announced Eisenhorn going into pre-production and things like that. And we don't really know where that's at, but I mean, even like big studio stuff like The Witcher is on hiatus right now because nobody can work. So like everybody is scrambling for that. So like what we were seeing was a pattern where it's like, okay, so they're probably going to roll out their new stuff kind of at the same time this stuff was supposed to release, so that when they, because like one of the huge things that's going to happen is like when Eisenhorn comes out, like that is going to create a mainstream fandom influx, the likes of which we have never seen. Like it's going to be absolutely massive. I mean, like again, like if we go to The Witcher, like the number of people that bought that game after the show came out was more people than bought it when it originally released, like The Witcher 3. So there is like a direct correlation between like something being at least marginally popular on a platform like Netflix or Amazon and a whole new vastly expanded fandom popping up around it. So even if like the Eisenhorn series is like a solid like 7 out of 10 or even a 6 out of 10, because we know how like people can latch on to something they really like even if they're not like in the majority, like it is going to create like a huge influx of new people into this hobby. And we were kind of thinking that they would be ready for that with the new facility. So like I don't know, we'll have to see. That is definitely one of those things like we're never going to know about it until they decide to tell us.
Do you think that the Memphis facility will ever like lighten the load? Because I was talking with Leo from Parabellum Games that does Conquest: Last Argument of Kings, and their facility is in California. Mm-hmm. They didn't even try to put it in Greece because they knew that like if they did it in Greece, they would be running into the same problems that GW did. And you know, even through all of this pandemic, they're about 2 weeks delayed instead of being like shut down indefinitely, which is a really scary email to get from GW. Like, and we don't know when we're coming back, and that's a really interesting thing. If like the diversification of where they manufacture. Because like I want to say that I've heard that they've done like maybe like the fine cast stuff in Memphis in the past, or certain things they would do there in like small runs just to kind of like pad numbers here in the States. But that was years
ago. As far as I know, Memphis has no machines. They have no machining there. It's purely warehouse because the corporate HQ moved from Memphis to Grapevine to Dallas. So that's
okay.
where like so like the Dallas building, and then by extension the what do they call it, the Citadel, that's like the US corporate headquarters, whereas before that was Memphis with the production facility, warehouse, and the battle bunker. So now Memphis is just like straight up like a shipping facility, like it's a warehouse shipping facility. Ironically, like I've talked about this before, because it's like I remember when they shut that facility down because the company was in such dire straits, and because of like the way they treated the consumer base. Like everybody was like, all right, fuck you, we'll go play, War Machine or whatever. Right. So like ironically, if they had just done what they're doing like now, 5 years earlier, they would never have had to shut down Memphis, and they wouldn't have had these production problems they have now. So, hindsight's 2020. I'm not exactly sure where the new facility is. I know it is in the UK. I'm sure maybe like one of the listeners, when this comes out, they'll maybe know somebody who knows somebody. Right. But as far like the last I heard, which was late last year, they were still working on it. So, and even then, like one of the funny things is that like a lot of people will say like, oh, well, store manager told me X, like, so I expect this new thing coming out. Like they don't tell managers shit. Like right. They're in exactly the same boat as everybody else. They might hear about a new release a few weeks ahead, like if there's a manager meeting or something. But like even they don't know where the maybe if you're like a store manager in the UK that has like seen the facility or is like nearby where they're building it or something, like maybe they know. But as far as like when we were at the shop, like the manager there, it's like you go to manager meetings and they're sort of like, yeah, we're working on it, and that's all they told them. Like they quarantine that information like really, really well for the most part. So right. I mean, all we can say is like we'll see. Like hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I find myself in the camp of I'm really excited for 9th edition, because my frustrations with GW aren't really like I like where the game is as far as model count goes. Like, and while yeah, I have Necrons, I would love for them to get like a updated codex or something of that nature. The models don't bother me. Like, there's something kind of cool about just like a dumb army of undead robots. I want to say that you called them a Scooby-Doo villain on one of the podcasts, and I thought that was one of the that is the perfect way to explain them, because that's it. They're just kind of MacGuffin to have a new adventure somewhere. But I don't need that to stay in the game. But I do need the game to feel more engaging, because the last time I did a big like what's that, Escalation League, there we go, I found myself by the end of the Escalation League, like the bell curve was like I suck at the game and I died instantly, to like 1,000 points being like pretty happy with the game, to by 2,000 points being like, this game sucks. And I know I was playing like a really Space Marines just had a new codex, so literally everybody busted out the new hotness. And I was playing 100% Slanesh, so like I knew I was going to lose. But the game, it felt like the bigger it got, the more bogged down it got, and the less fun I was having with the game. Like my gamer agency was completely removed, and I wondered why I was spending 3 or 4 hours every Tuesday night trying to even compete in the league, because I was like, I'm no longer having fun here. And so I'd like to see them do something that is more, I would like the game to have more of a back and forth, like a boxing match. Right. I'd like to have that.
I've heard that opinion a lot. Like, I think it's all down to personal opinion, because like when you look at the game pretty objectively, which is what we try to do on our show as much as possible, especially Kenny and I, since we do play on the pro circuit. There is 100% things about the game that can be broken. Like, that is like undeniable. There are, we talk about it. And there are some things that are like really good, and part of that has to do with the way that Games Workshop views their game. But then like sometimes people will just say like, well, I don't like 40K and this is why. I'm like, well, that has nothing to do with 40K. That's
Right.
just your opinion. Like I think I have my fingers in a lot of pies as far as games are concerned. So like I've heard the gamut of what people like and don't like. So like I think for a gamer like you who doesn't like the passivity of it not being your turn, you would probably really like Infinity. And Infinity is an amazing game.
Right.
The problem is that like people look at Infinity and they see the density of the rules and they kind of walk away before they actually try to read any of it.
Right.
But like if you really read the rules, like Infinity is probably like the best like written rule set of any modern tabletop game that we have, because everything is common sense. Like one of the problems that 40K has is the abstractions, where it's like, all right, infantry can walk through walls and they don't like phase through walls, right? Like you are to imagine that this infantryman is like kicking open a door, hopping through a window, vaulting over a ledge, maybe even like demoing a hole in the wall and coming in like the Kool-Aid Man, right? Like you have to imagine that as part of their rules. That's an abstraction. Whereas with Infinity, it's like, is there a door? No, go around, find another way in. Is there a door? Yes, you can open that door and walk in. Like, is the door locked? All right, do a skill check to see if you can open the door. Like, everything about that game is super common sense, so it's really easy to learn. It's just really dense. But at the core of that game, it's like you move and you shoot and you assault. Like, that's all there is to it. It's really simple.
Right.
And then they have AROs, like automatic reactionary orders. So if you move your model and it walks around a corner and your guy is watching his sector, like your guy now gets to do a thing. Like you can dodge to make sure you don't get shot. You can throw a smoke grenade, or you can try to hack, or you can just shoot that guy. You can be like, oh, he walked into my line of fire, I'm going to shoot him. You know, like, and that makes both players active in the game, even though it's not really your turn. So 40K being a like I go, you go system, like I don't have a problem with, because, you know, like I'm very forward thinking when I play 40K. Like I started off as a very reactionary player, and then as I've gotten better and played more and more and more, I've gotten to where it's just like I don't particularly care what you're doing. I'm just watching what you're doing and planning on what to do in my next turn. So I'm mentally very active in the game, even though I'm not really doing anything except rolling saves and stuff like that, or maybe like waiting to play stratagems. Like I think stratagems are one of the best aspects of keeping both players in the game, even though it's not your turn, because you basically have like trap cards now, which I find kind of fun.
I absolutely agree.
So like personally, I really hope they don't go to a 9th edition, like a whole new edition of the game, but that is a selfish bias because, like, again, I play on the pro circuit and I don't want a brand new edition in the middle of a season. But what I would very much like them to do is create a revised 8th edition where it's like, okay, so we've taken a look at everything. These are the problems. These are all of the FAQs that we've created. And we're just going to put that all into the new rule set so that everything is now streamlined and we can keep chugging along. But I don't know if they're willing to do that because of how the rules are tied into physical purchases. Like for them to create an 8th, like a revised rule book, right? Like this is the new 8th edition rulebook. It has all of the core FAQ changes that we've done throughout the last couple of years. Those are all in the book. You know, like match play revisions are in the book, et cetera, et cetera.
All the video list stuff entered in there. All the weird little things that like are completely broken up across the rule set. Yeah, that would be nice.
Well, I mean, those are like expansions. I'm just talking about the core rules, right?
Sure.
Like just to revise the core rules, like they would have to create a whole new starter set. Like they would have to print a whole new run of books, and they would have to either keep Dark Imperium on the shelves and, you know, basically for all subsequent printings of that, put that new book in there and then advertise it in some way that it's like a new book. So it's like, how do you distinguish, you know, old Dark Edition or Dark Imperium that's still on the shelves with the old rule book and the new one? So like you would have to either like put stickers on it, which they're usually pretty lax to do, or you would have to print a whole new run of boxes. So that's an investment. Or you'd have to come out with a whole new starter set, which is usually what they like to do if you look at their pattern. So they would have to make a whole new starter set. Like, are they ready to do that or not? There's a lot of like speculation and all of that, waiting to see what happens. But as far as like a new edition, I think the people that are asking for a new edition don't understand what that means, because like if you want a new edition, that means that you're going to have to go through an entirely new cycle of like new codexes. And what does everybody bitch about? Like, I just bought this $40 book, and then like an FAQ comes out, and I have to like keep track of the FAQs, and then like a new edition comes out, so now I have to wait for my new codex. And then we get back into that cycle of like, all right, well, I got my codex at the tail end of the previous edition, and so that means I'm going to get it at the tail end of this new edition. Like, I have a whole new cycle. And so then you're stuck like Necrons, where it's like, okay, well, Space Marines just got a new book, and like Chaos just got a new book. And so like, when is my new book going to come out? Because my army sucks because it's using the old archetype for the rule stuff. Like, I have to adapt my book to this new edition. So like, I'm much more in favor of a model like they have for Age of Sigmar, where like the core rules change very little, but they have like a general's handbook that comes out every year. And then like the turnover cycle for army books is a lot slower because you don't particularly need them to play the game, right? Like they have an app to build an army. They have the data sheets that you can buy separately. They have the general's handbook that has all your points value changes in it every year. And when they started doing that, we were like, oh, this is fucking great. Like, they're going to do this for 40K and it's going to fix all these issues. And so far they haven't done that, which is really weird. So like, we have chapter approved, but chapter approved is similar, but it doesn't really fix the problems that we have. I think what they need to do is just basically make chapter approved the revised core rules every time they print it, because it would only take a couple of pages, and treat it like a general's handbook. So like, basically the only thing you truly need to play the game is like models, data cards, and points values, which you buy every year with the new chapter approved. And then like, your codex is more of a fluff book than anything else. But I don't know, like I'm sure they have like a ton of people that are way smarter than I am that like read the statistics and like the buying and all that kind of stuff. So they know what they're doing probably more than I do. But I would like it to go to that. And I mean, like, in a perfect world, I would like it to be like Infinity, where like there is only the core rulebook and everything else is digital. Like, the army builder is tied into the Wikipedia, so you know exactly what every single rule does. And that, because they have that army builder and the army builder is tied into all organized events, the company can then track trends very efficiently. Right. Because what we see is, you know, somebody will do this like wild new thing at an event and like steamroll the competition, and Games Workshop has this knee-jerk reaction. I mean, like, we saw it with, I think it was Nova, where they were like, so like there was Nova where they were like, oh, we have to change how fly works because these jump pack dudes are making 2-inch charges off of a tall building, like, and then like with the Iron Hands where they were just like, oh, we need to nerf Iron Hands, and they did like a nerf, but it didn't fix any of the things that were broken with Iron Hands. It was a knee-jerk reaction to what they saw at an event, because like, they're not collating army lists. I mean, like, even Frontline doesn't really collate army lists, right? So I think if they actually took the time to make a army builder that was then integrated into organized play, they could be like, hey, like, everybody and their mom is taking a Space Marine Smash Captain. Why is that happening? Oh, it's because of the damage output he does, and he's only like 90 points. Like, that's a problem. We should fix that. And then on the other hand, they're like, nobody is playing Predator tanks, and we need to sell our product, so let's make Predator tanks good. Let's buff Predator tanks. But they don't do that, because they're tied to being a publishing house just as much as they are being a model creator. So like, will they ever do it? I don't know. Like, it would be great for us if they did, but I don't know if it would be great for them, so we'll have to see.
That's always a hard thing, and this kind of goes into my would you rather, which I wrote for you.
I'm so excited for this.
So instead of doing like a would you rather about toenails and pooping, which I love those. They make me laugh quite a bit. My would you rather for you is, would you rather GW take the genie says, Mr. James Workshop, this is how you're going to run your company, and the rules are more complete, and they are, like, perfectly play tested. There's no more gotchas in the middle of tournaments where you can like list and theory and perfectly balanced, but you have to go back and have the single monopost metal models for everything? Or would you like to keep on the trend right now of like really cool dynamic models, but the rule system never gets any better than what it is right now, and constantly is this game of how are they going to fix this? How are you going to, like navigate this world? Are the models more important to you, or is the game more important to you?
Okay. So this is actually surprisingly well picked for me, because on one hand, I hate assembling models. So a world where everything is a single piece and all I have to do is paint it really well to make it look cool is very tempting. But then on the other hand, I actually really like the constantly shifting meta of the game. But again, that's a personal bias because I play competitively. So like it gets me that fix. Like I used to play League of Legends every season, and I liked that the game wasn't perfectly balanced. You know, I liked there could be like meta breakers, and I liked there was, you know, like matchups where it's like, okay, if I'm playing this champion, like I have to look out for these 5, and you know that's going to be what I need to focus on, because if I get in that matchup, it's going to be huge disadvantage for me, right? I think in this sense, I would probably go more for like a system where we keep getting new models and the meta keeps constantly shifting, and you know maybe it's not a perfect rule set, but it's constantly, you know, evolving and sort of a living rule set. I think I would go for that just because I prefer that more as like playing the game. But yeah, if like every one of my cultists could be like one piece and I never had to assemble anything, that would be great. Yeah, I think I would go more on the new models with the rules being a little bit busted from time to time. I've kind of made peace with what 40k is. Like, I feel like if you've been doing this long enough and you haven't figured that out, like you need to get your head out of the sand. Like that's what this game is. Like, they make new models with hot new rules to sell new models. You know,
yeah.
And that's what it is. And like I'm fine with that, but I know that some people aren't. And my answer to that is like, you know, why do you care? Like if you don't play competitively, like if you're just playing with your homies or you have like a weekly meetup or whatever, like the onus is on you, the player, to control the games that you play. And what I mean by that is like whenever I hear somebody bitching like, oh, I got fucking rolled by this guy with a super OP list, I'm like, why? Why did you allow that to happen? Why did you play that person with that list, with the list that you have? Like if you're in an environment where the only place for you to play Warhammer and you're like the minority and wanting like very casual beer and pretzel games, like I empathize with that. But at the same time, like you can make friends with people and be like, hey, you know, when you and I play, could you tone it down? Right? You can have that conversation. Or if you're like if you're at your, you know, place of play and somebody's there with a pickup game, it's still on you to be like, well, what do you got? Like, what are you planning on playing? Right.
Right.
And then there's levels to this, right? So it's like first you have to be like, all right, well, this is what I have, you know, what do you have? And then you listen to what they have and you're like, okay, that level is you need to know enough about the game to realize like if somebody's putting 3 Riptides and 100 drones on the table, it's a really strong fucking list and you're probably going to get rolled if you're not prepared for it, right? So then you have to go to the next level. So it's like, all right, you know what they have, you know what you have, and you're like, all right, well, cool, so like let's throw down. And then if they start like putting stuff on the table, then like you've already agreed to this, and then it's on you, the player, and him, the player, with your attitude, how that game goes. So if you're playing this game and he's being like a real dick, then and you're not enjoying yourself, like why would you keep playing? Like I don't understand how people allow themselves to have these really bad experiences and then like bitch about it. So I'm like, that's on you. Like that's your fault. Right. Like if I'm playing a game with even if I'm at a tournament, like if I'm playing a game with somebody and I'm just like hating being near them because they're such a fucking cunt, like I'm just gonna be like, all right, dude, I don't need this win that bad. I'm gonna go get a beer. You can like go circle jerk in the bathroom because you won a game of Warhammer. Like that's cool for you. And then I'm gonna go into my next round. Like I don't care. And like my enjoyment of the game is tied a little bit to winning, but it's also tied to just like having a good experience. So if you don't want to play super competitively and you don't want to keep up with these metas, then don't.
Then don't, right?
They're like, don't do it. Like,
well,
you know.
And I imagine that the tournament level play is faster and more frenetic, like because you guys are in it, and like when you have two people who are learning it, it's a little
yeah. So if you're learning the game still, then like again, make that like, hey, I'm still figuring stuff out. I haven't been doing this that long. I might need to reference rules, stuff like have that conversation, right? And if that person is the type of player that's like, oh, like they're gonna have a problem with that, then like obviously you shouldn't be playing with that person. Don't play them. Don't have that bad experience. And yes, like on the pro circuit, everything is really snappy and really fast. And it's not so much that like that environment is like that because the play level is so much higher. Like I'd say the biggest reason that play is faster is people actually know their rules. Like they do. Like if I had $1 for every time somebody was like, I'm not gonna like read the book, I'm just gonna like start playing and like figure it out as I go, and then like a year later they still don't actually know the rules to the game, like I could buy a new fucking car. Like sit down, take 15 minutes to read the rules, like memorize a little bit of them, because it's impossible to memorize everything. Like I don't like I'm not an expert. Like I'm a slightly above average player as far as ITC rankings are concerned. Like I was in the top 500 in the world, and then I got 10th place in the hobby track, right? So like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not, some god tier player like Richard Siegler,
Right.
I can't remember everything, and I don't. Like I know my rules, and then I know enough about the game where if something sounds sketchy, like we'll look it up.
Right, of course.
But I don't know every single rule to this game. Like, I don't think unless you have just like a giant galaxy brain, like you can do that. But if you know your rules and you don't have to constantly look stuff up, then like the games will go faster, right?
Right.
And the other part of it is that like when we build lists for competitive play, it's less about like how those lists do in a matchup, and it's more about like a game plan. Like it's about meeting a win condition. And that's sort of the thing. Like some lists are skewed so heavily that if they're put in a situation through even as early as like matchup or like really early game stuff where it's like very clear you're not going to be able to meet that win condition, the game is immediately over. Right. And then some lists, they have a game plan. And then like if that doesn't start working out, they're flexible enough to adapt to the situation. So when we go into games, it's like I need to do X to win this game, and so everything I do is about doing that. Every movement that I make, there's no like hemming and hawing about like, oh, should I move over here, or should I move this guy over here, or how should I place these no, it's like you already know what you need to do regardless of the situation you're in, with a little bit of flexibility. So like that also lends to playing very fast.
Well, like I said, I love playing like the mono weird list. Like I really love the Slanesh stuff. I am pretty obsessed with their new models. Like the old Demonettes need to resculpt like badly, but that's just part and parcel of the thing. But like I had like 3 really good games, and they weren't because I won those really good games. It's because the other person was interested enough in learning the rules and making the game move. And one of my least favorite games that I had was with I won, and I won against a player playing Death Guard, and they brought this like really like they should have destroyed me sort of list, and he just didn't know how to play the army, and I felt so bad. By the end of it, I was like, dude, I feel really bad because I had figured out that like the Seekers were, if you want to be competitive with something like that, you need people who can get like bodies up close, and then the Demonettes do whatever the hell they do afterwards. But like the Seekers win you battles, especially against like Space Marines. And I rolled his entire field, and I've just like I felt so bad because like he wasn't having any fun by the end of it. I was like, we don't have to finish this game. And it was like my least favorite game, and it was like the cleanest win I had. And that was when I was like, man, I don't know I don't know if this tournament thing, like I'll play with friends, you know, like I said, keeping it small and fun is where I like to be. But that was a really sad experience for me.
I think there's a definite distinction between like a small local level tournament and like a bigger event. And you will see that from time to time. Like I've had some experiences in my, like we have a once a month tournament, like RTT here in town. And like, there have been some times where I play somebody and like, they have no business being across the table from my army, you know?
Right.
And it's like, you know, sometimes it's like a young guy or somebody who just got into the game, and there's, you know, it's a communal event and they want to be part of that. They want to be social, so they go to the big social events. And it's like, okay, cool. Like I get it, but like, you know, I'm playing for ITC points. So like, I'm going to be a gentleman first off. I'm going to be a sportsman secondly, first, you know, like I'd say sportsman first above everything, because like I really care about that. And I'm going to try to win. Like I'm not going to pull punches, you know, like especially if it's later rounds, which can happen in RTTs, because it's almost like you can play somebody who's won games, but like they won sort of by default, right? And
of course,
so like there's games where I'll be in the you know, the last round, and I'm just like, man, you know, I'm sorry this is going to happen, but like I'm playing for points, so like,
right,
you know, this is going to happen. I would say like a better experience overall for tournaments, like a better like example or like face for tournaments is like bigger events. So like events like Adepticon, events like LVO, 100 people plus events. I mean, like even like GTs that have like 30, 40, 50 people in them can be way different than a very small local level tournament with like 12 guys.
Right.
And most of the time, there are exceptions, but most of the time, people that go to those events go to have a good time. And unless you know that you are going to be in a specific bracket, like if you're going to be on top tables after day one, just be you know how good you are at the game, you know what your list does. Most of those guys, like they're there to have a good time, and their like level of fun is in no way connected to winning. So you can have guys where it's just like round one, like, you know, I've gone to events where like round one, I get matched against somebody who is just like, you brought this? Like, okay. And we have an amazing game. We have an amazing game because he's obviously there to fuck around. He's there to have a good time. He doesn't care if he's winning. Like one of the main reasons I love tournament play so much is it has nothing to do with playing Warhammer. And it has everything to do with meeting people. And like having social experience with people, because I get to meet new people and make new friends. And so like, even if I lose the game, I'm like, that was awesome. Like I had a great time playing with you. Like the conversation across the table was really fun. And yeah, like sometimes you will have a bad experience. Like, sorry, like people are usually, you know, pieces of shit. Like that's just the way it is. But I would still strongly recommend people go to at least one major event, and like, as it is your first major event, bring something that you don't care if you win or lose.
Right.
You know, like go into that situation and tell yourself like, my level of fun is not tied to winning a game.
Right.
So even if I go 0-6, like I don't care. And you will have one of the best times in Warhammer you've ever had. I promise you. Like I guarantee you will.
That's definitely something that I didn't sign up for anything for Adepticon this year. Literally what we're doing right now is what I was hoping to have happen, where I'd meet content creators, meet people in the industry, and, you know, just generally have a good time. And so like, again, I thank you for sitting down with me talking. But like, I didn't enter into any big competitions because I was doing more the painting thing, which is another aspect that I want to talk to you about. You know, I entered into was going to do a Resin Beast entry because that put me closer to the painters that I wanted to meet, knowing that I was going to go in, get some really good feedback about where I'm at as a painter, but like being able to sit next to like Sam Lins or Vince, and, you know, like be able to meet these people in person would be, you know, really what I wanted to do. And part of your persona online is your YouTube videos and your Twitch streaming of painting, and I really love the way that you look at painting models. You are so much more utilitarian, where you're just like, this has got to get on the table, this has got to look good, but like I understand that I have to do 40 of these. I'm not going to get bogged down on all this, and if I have to go back and touch stuff up, it's fine. And there's something about watching your videos that has given me a really good sense of just like stop worrying and just get it done. And that has been like really freeing. And I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like how you develop that and how people respond to that, because you know, it seems like your YouTube channel and everything keeps on, you know, you support it as much as you can, but I think you're in the same spot as Kenny, where YouTube is a lot more work than it's worth a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, but you know, you don't make money on YouTube.
Right, right.
But yeah, like I do care about it. So the way that I paint is largely based on it comes out of doing commission work. So like a lot of painters will kind of go through this part of their journey, and like some of them will stick with it and some of them will be like, it's for the birds, like whatever. So like you get to a point where you kind of become that guy at your community who's good enough at painting where people are like, oh, that looks really good, dude. And you have time to paint things for other people. So like people will come to you like, hey, how much would you want to like paint some of these models for me? You know, and like they kind of get a taste of that and they want to keep doing it. So I did commission work for about 4 years, a little less, like right at the cusp of 4 years. And most people don't realize this, but like it's kind of a thankless job, and it is a real grind. And when you're like, oh, I have to paint like 3,000 points of Tau for this guy, you figure out ways to get it done, right? Yeah. And you still have to look good, you know, because he didn't pay you to just like slap paint on there like a kindergartner, right? Right. So you learn a lot of tricks for that, and I've continued that. So like typically when I paint an army that I'm going to be using for tournament play, I utilize a lot of those techniques, and also it kind of marries hand in hand with like how fast the game changes, because like I could need some stuff for an event, and then like by the next month those same units that I needed for that event I don't need anymore. I need something else. So I need them to look good because I want to get my hobby points, right? But I need to get it done fast. And that's why I have I made a video where I'm like, spreadsheets, why are they super awesome for painting? And like, because having a plan and keeping to that plan is the fastest way to get stuff done. Because like kind of aimlessly painting stuff is why I see people like be so slow. And that's why I can say like I can paint a 2,000 point army of any faction in 17 days. Because like I know that like I, you know, form a plan, I make a spreadsheet, and I'm knowing that like, okay, on day 1 I'm doing this, and by day, 15 I'm going to be here. Because, and 17 days works for me because I have the time to do that. Whereas not everybody has that time. But if you only have like an hour you can paint daily, factor that into your spreadsheet, and then like you will paint stuff way faster even with that short amount of time.
Of course. Because
you're doing it. You know that like between the hours of 6 and 7 p.m. I'm going to paint, and I'm only going to focus on doing this one task. And you get it done, and the time flies by, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. And I don't need to worry about anything else because I know that tomorrow between the hours of 6 and 7, I'm going to do this other step, and so on and so forth. And you'll get stuff painted really quick. And the other thing is that I paint every single one of my armies with a rubric in mind, a grading rubric. And that's the... you can do like either the Adepticon one, or like Frontline has a really good grading rubric, and it's just like, what will it take for my army to get max paint points? And it's actually surprisingly easy. Like the bar is set fairly low, and if you just execute all of those little checkboxes, not only will your army look really good, but you're also rewarded for that with your paint judging points, which is why like I'm sort of a slightly above average player on the pro circuit, but I was top 10 on the hobby track.
Which is awesome.
Like, yeah. And so like that was like a real accomplishment for me. I was really happy because like I don't think they announced anything other than like first place for the awards ceremonies at LVO. But waiting on my plane the next day and I'm checking the end results of the season, I'm like, oh shit, I got 10th place in the hobby track in the world. Like that's really cool. And you look at my armies in person and they're not like they're good, but they're not anything you would be like, oh my god, this is like the greatest thing ever. Like my entire army is not painted like Angel Heraldez paints studio models. You know what I mean? Like they all look good, but they're not individual works of art with every single model. Like I can't afford to spend 12 hours on a single model for a 67 model army. Like I just can't do it.
Right.
I don't have the patience to do that either. Like, I really love painting for painting, but also like I will literally never spend more than 12 to 14 hours on a model. And even then that model would have to be like a set piece model for an army, like a Lord of War or a hero or something. Even to think about doing that many hours on it. Like I would never do that. I mean, like we just painted the new Gazgul on Twitch. And I think it was a total of like 10 hours over 4 streams. And
that's a big model.
Yeah. I'm just like, even if I had the time, which I do, like I am not going to spend 17 hours on this Gazgul model. It's just not going to happen. Like I'll give up if that ends up being the case. Like I just don't have the patience. Like I'm not going to do it.
Do you ever take any of your models to do like independent competitions or maybe like Golden Demon standards?
I have in the past.
You even remotely interested? You have in the past?
Yeah, like I entered Golden Demon once and only once, and it was at the very last US Games Day in Memphis. And I got knocked out of bronze for single fantasy miniature because I didn't have a display plinth. And I was like, that was one of my first realizations with like painting competitions, is that like not always the best model wins. And that's also like you get into a discussion of like, oh well, like can something that is a work of art objectively be better than something else? So I don't know. Like I have always been a very competitive person. I like competitions, so like painting competitions should be something I like, but I've always noticed that like they're not always like the best judges of like what's the better painted model, for one.
Sure.
And so like again, I'm very utilitarian, like you said. So it's just like, to me, I'm like, you're judging my model. Why does it matter if it's on a 2-inch block of wood? Like that's bullshit. Like what does that add to the model except raising it off the desk 2 inches? Like it shouldn't be factored in whatsoever, but it is. I've never competed in Crystal Brush because like I saw it for the first time about 5 years ago, and I immediately was like, oh, so the only people that win is a world level artist that pays a world level sculptor a significant amount of money to make them a one of a kind work of art that they then paint as a one of a kind work of art, and they get by on wow factor alone. And I'm just like, so I'll never win, thus I'm just not going to enter. Like the game is rigged. And it's also like, I have a good friend of mine here in Austin, Steven Garcia, who's a world level painter. He competes in Crystal Brush and wins a lot. Like he's an amazing painter. And even he is just like, yeah, sometimes I think about not doing it because it's less like a subjective or objective judging of the model, and it's more like a popularity contest by hobnobbing with the people. Because like you have to know the judges ahead of time to know what those judges like, and then paint to that standard. So it's just like, sometimes you may not even be painting in your signature style, which I don't do. Like I only paint my way. And that's just how it's like. I'm not going to paint in somebody else's style, for something like that. So I just, for me, like the painting competition stuff, like I don't do it. Like I don't get anything out of it, because like, if they're just like, oh, well, like you could work on this and that and the other thing, I'm just like, well, those are things that I'm never going to do because that's what you like. That's not what I like. So it doesn't make me a better painter by doing it. And that's not to say that like nobody will get anything out of it. It's just that I don't. And I've also noticed that like you could do a painting competition and think your stuff looks really good, and then some like basement dweller that you've never heard of that is this world-class artist shows up, and it's just like, oh, well, they're gonna win. It's a different form of competition where like I like competition where my achievements like matter. So,
Right.
or like my skill or whatever, like I like when that is a factor that matters. And painting competitions are not that type of playing field. Like it's just not.
Yeah.
So I choose to not do that because it's not for me.
Yeah, I'm finding myself becoming less enthusiastic about it, even though like my end goal is to have that be my way of like in being introduced to the industry and the players and stuff. But like when I was talking with Shoshi about it, she was like, I hate competing, but I feel it's part of my brand to get out there and to be part of it. And she's like, but I know I'm not going to win because I don't paint the way that everybody thinks that I should. And I'm very much the same way. I always say that my painting style is kind of like Disney on PCP. It's bright colors. It's kind of like ridiculous, but also like pretty scary in the same zone. And that, while I think is fun and looks great on the table when you're playing against other people, like I feel that everybody has fun with it. I know that it isn't what people are looking for, and I'm trying to understand literally everybody's involvement in that part of the hobby, because it feels like it's so there's so much weight put on it, and sometimes I think that's why people don't want to play these games, because they just are like, well, if I can't do it the best, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, I don't think you're understanding that like this is like meditation time, this is fun time, this is playing, and even if you go out with a half gray army and a half painted to your best army, like you're doing something and interacting with people, which is so much better than sitting around and farting into the couch, which it feels
Right.
like that was my path for so long, was just like this isolation. And I love playing with people. Like that to me is like, it's thrilling every single time.
Yeah, like the social aspect is, I think, one of the biggest reasons I love tabletop gaming, to be honest. Like it doesn't really matter what game it is or what the models look like. It's more like the social interaction.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think some people put more stock in painting competitions than others. Like it all depends on like what type of hobbyist you are. Like if you're the type of hobbyist that like, my hobby is painting miniatures, that's what I do. I spend weeks and weeks on a single model. That's like scale modelers, like that's what they like. They don't play games with their models. Like they'll spend months on a single tiger tank, right? And to those people, painting competitions are sort of like the thing, like the big leagues. That's what they look at. Like these are the best out there. And so like if you are that type of painter, sort of like Soshi, because she doesn't play any games, they're like not big ones that I know of, right? Like they don't go to tournaments or anything.
Right.
Part of your brand kind of inevitably becomes like being in painting competitions, because that's all there is to do. And so if your fan base is a bunch of people who only paint models and do nothing else, then like it kind of gets intrinsically tied to that, which can lock you into something you don't want to do. And then I would say like, well, branch out, like do something else, like change your brand. You're in control of that.
Right.
Whereas like I really enjoy doing like cool flashy models on videos and on streams that look really dope. But at the same time, like I don't collect models that I don't put on the table, which is why like I've just painted this giant Gazgul model. I don't have an Orcs army, so like that's being given away later in the month. Same with Ragnar. Like I don't play Space Wolves, so like when I'm done with painting Ragnar, like I'm giving it away. Like I don't want it. The only, well, I mean, like I just like I'm not like, I am at the same time a collector and not a collector.
Yeah,
so like
you're not a hoarder, is what you are. You're
well,
you're
I mean,
a collector, not a hoarder.
I wouldn't call collecting hoarding. I would say that like in my cases behind me, like are models that I play the game with. So like I have an Ultramarines collection, I have a Chaos collection, and I have a smattering of other Imperium things and some Eldar, like some Dark Eldar stuff that I play with. And then like with a rather few exceptions, I don't collect models. So if it's something that I know I'm never going to put on the table and never play with, or it doesn't fit into my armies, like I don't want it because it just takes up space. And I have this weird thing where like I hate when models are like kept in a box in a closet and like never used because they are game pieces. So like if I have an army that I know I'm never going to use again, then I'll just like sell or give away that army, because like I hate the fact that it would just like sit there until the end of time. Where else, if I give it away, somebody can get enjoyment out of it by putting it on the table and playing it. So I'm equally a collector, but not.
Sure. No, that totally makes sense. So are you now like 100% content creating, doing YouTube, Twitch, and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm retired Army, so I don't really have like a main gig. I don't have like a job, so like YouTube and Twitch is
Sure.
sort of like a side gig to keep me busy, which is why I don't particularly care about turning a profit on it. I mean, like I have things where like you can sub to my channel, you can sub to my Patreon, you can buy a T-shirt on my merch store if that's what you want to do. But if I don't get any income, I still particularly don't care because that's not why I'm doing this. That's also like why I do a lot of the things that I do. Like there's a difference in like business model between like Kenny and I, because like it's Kenny's job. It's what he makes money on. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't have a job. So the way that his channels work and all that is because of that, and the way that mine work is because like I don't care about money. So that's why I don't like sell models, and I don't do like donation giveaways and things like that. It's just like, you know, I do subscriber giveaways because giving those models to the viewers is my way of giving back for them supporting me. Because like if I turn like a little bit of profit, or I break even on the expenses for running the channels, then like that's enough for me. So that way I'm not like out of pocket wasting money on it. So if people support me, then I want to give back to them, which is why I reward the people that support me, and I don't reward the people that just watch and, you know, don't support the channel in any way.
Right. That totally makes sense. And how did you get tied up with the Spiky Bits boys and doing the Long War stuff? Because they said that you had been working behind the scenes with them for a while. Were you like writing articles for the website and that sort of thing?
Well, it started. It's funny. The Long War is what got me back into 40K. Because at the tail end of 7th edition and like the last dark times, I was sort of just done with 40K because it had gotten so preposterous that I was just like, I'm not having fun with this.
Right.
And so I took like a good 2 year, like year and 3/4 hiatus from just like miniatures in general. I was doing like some scale modeling and getting back into that. And then I had heard rumblings of like a new edition. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, you know, I have been wanting to play Warhammer for a while, so let me get back into it. I'll get an army together, and I was like, I'll do one I've never done before. I'll do like Imperial Guard, like that sounds fun. So I started doing that, and I was like, well, maybe there's some like cool like podcasts or something that I can listen to. And so like even back in, you know, the like 2011, 12, 13, 14, like I would go to Spiky Bits for like relevant news and stuff like that in the hobby. And so I was like, I'll check out Spiky Bits, see what's going on. And then I saw that the Long War podcast was like hyperlinked into their webpage, and I was like, oh, let me try this out. And I think it was the first episode they ever had Jason on, because they had just like a few months before launched the Twitch like stream team thing. Mm-hmm. And so they had him on talking. I was like, oh, that's like, I didn't know people painted stuff on Twitch. I thought it was for video games. And so like I checked it out, and I went to Jason first. And I love Jason, but he and I have very different philosophies on painting and very different styles. So like I learned some stuff from him, but you know, I'm not going to learn a lot because he just
of course
paints in a, you know, very different manner than I paint. So then he hosted over to Kenny, and I had never heard of or met Kenny before. And as soon as I saw the way that he painted it, I was like, oh, this is dope. Like, this is my guy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I immediately figured out was like, oh, he has like he does like a persona. Like, this isn't who he is. Now,
literally the best.
Yeah, literally the best. Yeah. So it's like, he's as tied to, you know, next level painting as like Terry Bollea is tied to Hulk Hogan. So there's crossover there, like, but it's funny because I do from time to time I see people like, oh, I don't really like how he acts and the way he talks and stuff. I'm like, he's not really like that as a person.
Right.
Like that's
He's
it's
not
like
Macho Man all the time.
yeah, that's his WWE persona. Like I immediately figured that out. And I was like watching his stuff, and over time we became friends. And then I started getting into going to events again, and so like we would meet up and hang out. And then I think by that time I had already started streaming because I was like, oh, I kind of want to do this. Like this seems fun, you know. And over a few years of that, like they ended up bringing me and Hannah into the stream team. And I talk to Kenny like all the time. We've been going to events for like I think 2 years at this point. So when they had a spot open up on the podcast, I was already part of the stream team and was like a recognizable brand, and I could bring something to the show. They invited me to come onto that, so that was really cool to be able to be here now. Like if you told me, 3-4 years ago that I would be on this like the biggest 40K podcast out there, I'd be like, nah, never do that.
Yeah, right.
I did write a little bit for Rob from time to time. The way that writers for him generally work is like they kind of have like a weekly thing they need to push out, and like he has people dedicated to certain aspects. And so like I kind of came in and started off as sort of like a hot takes kind of guy because that's what I am. Like,
right.
I can have discussions with people, and like if I'm wrong about something, then like I can see that and like have discourse and all like that. But like generally I don't care what people think of me. Like, like I just don't.
Right.
Like I'm gonna call it like it is in the way I see it, and if you disagree, well then like cool, you can have an opinion, but I don't care.
Right.
But very, very quickly, I realized that like if I don't have anything to say, I'm not good at writing. And those times where I did have something that I wanted to say, like were few and far between. So I sort of like stepped away from that because it's just not my gig. Like Rob is way more on the like tracking down the stories, sort of semi-journalism type thing that they do, and that just wasn't me.
Right.
But same as with Kenny and Mike, I've been friends with Rob at this point for a few years. So it was, I wouldn't say it was like logical because they could have picked other people, but I was a really good choice, and they immediately were like, hey, well, let's bring him on. So I'm really grateful that they did that. I really enjoyed doing it, and it's been a lot of fun, and I want to keep doing it. So I'm just having a great time.
I think you're a great fit because I listened to it before you were on, and I remember it was basically just like Rob and Kenny talking, and Mike would chime in there, but like the other two people that were in and out of the show, like they didn't say anything for a really long time. I was like, it's weird. There are people there that talk, but they are not part of this. And as soon as you came on the show, and I had been watching your YouTube channel and the videos before that, so I was like, oh, that's awesome. I'm glad that he's finally doing this. You're a really good addition to it, and you have a good cadence. You don't do the long pregnant pauses that I do all the time, and it's really impressive hearing how you and Kenny and Rob can all banter back and forth, and Mike is, I think, like, I'll be sad if he ever stops doing the podcast because he's like such a good voice of reason that comes through.
Yeah, Mike is a fan favorite. Like we love having him on there. When I first started watching the show, I very quickly realized the pattern of the show skewing way more into a competitive sense, especially when Sean was brought on the show. And I love Juice and I love Sean. Like we're also friends through the previously listening to the podcast and like being part of the tournament circuit. But there's a but in there. Like a lot of people were sort of getting turned off because like we have a pretty wide audience, just like we have a wide breadth of people in this community. And so when I came on the show, like I stay in my lane, like that's the army in me. But I did want to, I brought forth ideas. I was like, well, what if we started being like a little bit more upbeat about stuff, or we started having a little bit more of a hot take type discussion on things. And like I'm a fan of other podcasts, so like I listen to the Your Mom's House podcast with Tom Segura and his wife Christina Pashitsky,
Yeah.
which are both comedians, and it's one of my favorite things in the world. It's hilarious. But one of the things they have been doing on there is the would you rather jokes, and I love that aspect of it. And I wanted to try it out. I was like, let's try it out, and if people respond well to it, then like, you know, we can do it weekly. And it immediately was like super popular, and it doesn't even need to be that people were like that was funny, but like even for a little bit of like shock jock value, sometimes like people responded to it, and now it's something that we quote like all the time. Like I think the big like the mayonnaise one, that was like a firestorm, which I did not expect. Like people were like legit like and it wasn't even eating the mayonnaise, like it was whether or not Miracle Whip was in fact mayonnaise. That was like the great like mayonnaise wars for like 2 months. People were like, Miracle Whip isn't mayonnaise. I'm like, but it is mayonnaise. It's in the mayonnaise aisle. Like, don't give me this bullshit. Like, it's mayonnaise. We're like, nah. But yeah, I really like being able to do that every week. It's fun. I have always enjoyed like radio and other types of podcasts that have that kind of attitude. Like, I'm not talking about having like you know, morning zoo type radio. Like, I don't think that's not our thing, but like having a little bit of, you know, some fun kind of shock jock radio in there I think is really fun. So I'm glad that people latched onto that. I'm glad that people really like that aspect of the show. So now we have, you know, we have a much better show layout where we kind of plan it where it's like, all right, we'll do the intros, and then we'll do the would you rather to start everybody off, get everybody loose. Right. And then we go into the like the hobby watch marketplace. Yeah, we'll do that for a little bit, and that kind of gets those people excited, and then we can get into our discussions. And now that there's a different voice on the show that isn't like 100% tournament play, because like Kenny he's the showrunner, like he's Howard Stern, right? Yeah. So he is also a competitive player in that scene very heavily and is an expert on that thing, but he's also, you know, like me, he's also a painter. Whereas Juice and Sean, that was like their only thing. Like they are tournament players first and foremost, and that's really all they had to offer. So now that it's more like Rob is the hobby guy, he's the market watch guy. Haspel is like the voice of reason, he's pop culture, brings some gravitas and wisdom to a lot of these conversations. Kenny is the showrunner, and then I can be a valid voice in the conversation regardless of what the situation is, be it, you know, rules, tournaments, hobby stuff, model stuff, like any of that kind of thing. So I like it a lot. I think it works, and we've had really great feedback on that. So I just hope we keep doing that. It keeps getting good feedback.
Yeah, I think you should definitely keep it up because you know, it's not that I didn't like the dick joke and then the poop joke at the beginning of every episode, but ever since the would you rather, it feels more just like accessible. Like I never like sit back and be like, oh, here comes the fart and dick joke again. You know, it's just like it's way more funny. And I think that it has a better pacing because of that, and I really appreciate it. And ever since you've come on, I'm thrilled that you are part of the conversation and part of the personality. Because as this, you know, we're in a gaming renaissance and a hobby renaissance right now, sans the, you know, pandemic that we're sitting in the middle of. But we are getting introduced to all these new characters, and it's so cool that there is a place for everybody in it, and I really appreciate you know, the Long War, everything that you're doing, even your YouTube videos. Even though I know that it's not your biggest focus, I love it all, and I really appreciate you taking the time and everything in this hobby, because I think, as Sam Lynn says, anything that we can do to boost the signal is going to ultimately be better for all of us. And whether that's your painting or your playing or collecting or whatever your aspect in the hobby is, I can't think of a healthier time to be in it, which is really, really exciting for me.
Oh yeah, I'm like I'm the happiest I've ever been playing 40K or just being in the hobby in general. I mean, like right now I'm working on some Infinity stuff, so like I like spreading it out, but like 40K is my first love.
Sure.
And I think it's the best time. Like it really is. And I very much agree with Sam. Like anything that we can do as content creators or just, like ambassadors for the hobby, as Mike likes to say, just like be a positive influence. And kind of tying it all the way back to the new video stuff that we're seeing. Like we're going to get Angels of Death soon. There's a lot of people that had never seen anything about 40K and they saw Astartes, which is amazing.
Right?
It has like 19 million views total for all their videos and going up. And then with Eisenhorn coming out in the future at some point, like we are going to have a lot of people that are getting into this for the first time. And so like we've really been trying to push this like plea of just like don't be fucking assholes, like be good people, be ambassadors for the hobby. Don't gatekeep, like, just let people enjoy playing toy soldiers, because that's what we're doing. Like, don't try to pick sides, don't try to be divisive, like, accept that you like doing one thing and somebody else likes doing another, and just like we should all be friends. Like that's one thing we've talked about on the podcast before. We had like a whole episode discussion on it where it's just like it doesn't matter how we play 40K, like we should all be friends because there's not very many of us. And when you meet somebody out in the wild where it's like, oh, you like 40K, like me too, this is awesome, you should immediately be best friends, right?
Yeah.
Because it's our niche thing. And if you're like, ooh, you're a tournament player, like you're the worst, like you're the asshole in that situation. You just are. Like we should be friends because we both love Warhammer, regardless of how we each like to enjoy the hobby. So like please just keep doing, like be good and positive influences, and don't whinge and moan about toy soldiers, and don't be toxic, and don't gatekeep, and all of those things. Like just be nice and be friends with everybody, because we're all loving 40K at the same time.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. And I think that's probably a really perfect place to end this conversation, because otherwise I think we probably keep on talking literally all day long, which is one of my favorite parts about this hobby. There is this ongoing Facebook Messenger that I'm with people that are just like from totally random walks of life here in St. Louis, and we talk toy soldiers and bullshit for like all day, every day. And it's funny because I don't think any of our lives will ever like cross paths outside of 40K, but yet in this hobby we are like best friends, and I love that. That's something that I'm coming from a music background, musicians are not like that. They're really like gatekeepy and like don't steal my shit. I'm all about the altruistic nature of this hobby, and I really appreciate you being a voice in this, and I really appreciate you sitting down and talking with me today.
Yeah, dude, it's super fun. Let's do this again sometime.
Oh, definitely. And this is going to be something that I want to touch back on, maybe in a couple months, maybe once the summer release thing starts going. Well, I want to be, this to be kind of like an ongoing conversation with the content creators and everybody, because I think we all have really interesting points of view, and I think it's healthy to hear more people talk about it.
For sure.
For sure. Excellent, Wyatt. Thank you so much. Is there any place that you want me to send people to see your content, or is there a best way to interact with you?
Yeah, so we have the YouTube channel and the Twitch channel. They're both under the same name, so not that hard to find. We record the podcast live every Wednesday evening, about 7 p.m. Central Time. So when we start up, and we do it in 2 parts. So what a lot of people don't know is that we have like a pre-show where it's way more interactive with the people watching, and we joke around a little bit more because we're just trying to like feel out what we want to talk about for the recording, and we joke around a little bit more. Our takes are a little bit hotter sometimes on the pre-show, so if you like hearing some of that, then like make sure you're checking that out. That's twitch.tv/longwartv, all one word. And we start about 7 p.m. Central Time. We do a pre-show for about an hour, and then we take like a 10-minute break, and then we do the recording live, so you can be a part of that as well. We also stream on YouTube at the same time. So if you're like a YouTube aficionado, then you can catch us out there, same day, same time. And I think that's about it. Yeah.
Man, I appreciate, and I highly recommend checking out the pre-show. That some of the funnier shit hides in that pre-show, which is
the pre-show is the best part. So we're doing a brand new thing. This is going to be Sunday the 19th, evening time, probably about the same time as the podcast, about 7 p.m. Central Time. We're not 100% on that yet, but it is Sunday the 19th this month. We are doing a live Twitch and YouTube broadcast D&D one-shot of the Rick and Morty module. So the four of us
awesome.
and a friend of mine who's going to DM for us, we're going to do the Big Rick Energy D&D module with themed characters. We're really going to do this to the nines, so like make sure to check it out.
Awesome. I'll make sure to get this up before then, because yeah, that will be worth watching. Excellent, Wyatt. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. And
thanks for having me.
And I'll hop up on one of your streams here soon.
All right. Cool. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Thank you for watching another episode of Hobby Time in the Murder Basement. I so appreciate your support. If you could go ahead and give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, leave a comment, literally do anything that you can to help get this channel a little bit more traction. I'd really appreciate it. I hate when channels ask every single episode for this. It becomes mundane and monotonous. So I figured I'd just record one of these. That way you only have to hear me do this once, just at the end of every one of my videos. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.